Good morning, students. Welcome to the Grammar and Writing Skills online sessions. I'm Mr. Charles, and I will be with you for the week 4 lesson. Please go to page 35, dashes and commas, and we'll throw parentheses as well with them. When do we use dashes? Well, dashes are used when you want to highlight or draw attention to something in a sentence. For example, look at this car, very impressive. We had to move from the forest, scared and muddy, into the main road. Very impressive, scared and muddy are the phrases in your sentence that you want to draw attention or highlight for the reader. Commas, on the other hand, have many uses, but the one that is mostly confused with the dashes or intertwined with the dashes is the one to introduce an interrupter phrase or clause. And that is where the dashes are the correct replacement. So the commas are used in a wrong way. They are misused in such a sentence that is to introduce an interrupter phrase or clause. And that's when you should use dashes instead. All doctors, if they care about their patients, are concerned with good office hygiene. In this sentence, the commas are used to introduce an interrupter phrase or an interrupter clause in this case. And this should be replaced by a dash after doctors and dash after patients. As I moved nearer, I smelled the food, dolma cooked in delicious meat. In this case as well, the comma is used to introduce an interrupter phrase, or as well clause in this example. So we should replace the comma with a dash and then a period at the end. Parentheses contain words that provide extra information about something else in the sentence. So they are more or less like dashes, but they are less formal than dashes or commas. For example, the president, the previous one, traveled only by private jets. This is an informal way to say the president dash the previous one dash traveled only by private jets. The actions we did unwillingly were the reason for the punishment. Again, we use parentheses here because it is an informal way of adding extra information. The main information in this sentence is that the actions we did were the reason behind our punishment or for our punishment. But you want to add a bit of extra info here that the actions were unwillingly done. You were forced to do them, for example. So you add this bit of extra info through dashes if you want to be formal, but if you want to be less formal, you add them through parentheses. Question 8, page 35. As with all our questions, you may pause the video now, try to solve all 3 of them. The question requires you to replace commas with dashes in 3 of these sentences. 1 is correctly used, or you may pause the video for each one we solve together. So the first one, 3 of these sentences, so the commas should be replaced with dashes. The first one, there was only one thing I could do, put my hands out and grab the creature. This sentence does require the replacement of commas with a dash. And since the added information, the extra information, prolongs until the end of the sentence, so we just need one dash. B, I walked through the woods, turned off down a path, and went home. This sentence does not actually require you to put a dash instead of a comma, because this is not extra information, this is listing. This use of comma is exclusive to the comma. It's not the job of a dash, like the extra information or the interrupter information. C, and suddenly I saw what the problem was. The animal was caught in barbed wire. This one should be replaced with a dash because the extra information is that the animal was caught in barbed wire. And D, as I got closer, I saw clearly the head of a donkey reaching out of the water. This one again should be replaced because the information, the essence of the sentence, as I got closer, I saw clearly, ends here. The extra clarification or information is that the head of a donkey was reaching out of the water. Now, towards the end of the chapter, we should be able to write a story, a descriptive, thoroughly descriptive story about encountering a person, an animal, or an object. For the sake of the following example, I chose the encountering of a person, but they mainly revolve around the same checklist. That is, you write a descriptive story of a time you encountered an object, a person, or an animal. And the checklist goes first, make sure you describe with specific vocabulary, specific of the person, specific of the setting, specific of the feelings, actions, etc. So everything you describe should be described with specific words that suit the context or the connotation or the feeling, as we said last week. The second item on the checklist is that you should create images through the use of the five senses. As of all descriptive writing, by now you should be able to know that the job of a descriptive piece is to create images, and this is done through the use of the five senses and literary devices. Third item on the checklist is that you should use comparisons, questions, dashes, and different sentence structures. So simple, complex, as much as you can, and compound, of course. And the third item for the checklist is basically to avoid boredom, to avoid run on. Try to vary your style so that the reader still feel enticed. Here's a general grid on how to plan your writing, structure your plans before you start. First of all, for our question, you have to begin with the setting. Begin from outside of the story. Imagine it as a big circle, and inside of it, there are smaller and smaller circles. The biggest circle should be the setting. Start with the setting of the story. What were you doing there? And where and how did you meet that person? Then move on to the person himself. Describe their outer and behavioral features. That is, what did they look like from the outside and how did they behave? If you're wondering why we can't describe him from the inside as well, his psychological features, well, it's just an encounter. It's not a meeting, it's not a get together. You don't really get to talk a lot with that person. It's just an encounter. This implies that you saw, met for a very short period, then moved on with both of your lives. So this is an outer and behavioral. How were they acting description. Then move on to how did that make you feel? So their outer description and behavioral made you feel something, some things. What were those feelings? This is also to broaden the image that the reader might relate to. Then move on to what happens next after you saw them. And then, how did the situation resolve? End with what happened at the end. End with how did this whole encounter end or resolve. The following is an example that you will criticize. Tell me what you think were the right attributes and where can we improve the following piece. Going to get groceries was not my favorite thing in the world. I preferred to stay home and continue watching Westworld. I was sitting on my armchair sofa, cola in one hand and the other swimming in cheesy Doritos bag, watching an intense episode from the show, when my mother shouted, Haji man, come here. I wiped the cheese stains in a tissue and went to her. She had prepared a list for me to get from the market. But Mom, it's night time, I said. Her facial expression did not seem that she cared, so I got to my room, put on my blue shirt, and went off. This is the introduction to the piece. It is it does create enough images and relatable details for you to put yourself as a reader in that position. We have determined the first setting, that is how the actions started. We have determined some sensory details, the sitting on the sofa, the watching, and then the cheesy fingers because of the Doritos bag, and then getting up, changing clothes, and then it's a blue shirt. Some specific details as well here. The road to the market was half lit, with yellow lights that fog was able to overwhelm. It was December, so that means a chilly night, doesn't it? The market consists of paralleled caravans made of wet wood and people standing behind them selling their goods. Some of those were selling hot chocolate, so you had a mix of fog, people's exhaling, and some vapor of the hot drinks. I was barely able to see, but I did smell a lot. 2 kilos of tomato, half a kilo of meat, and 1 liter of olive oil. I kept rewinding these in my head and out loud so that when I spot the shops, I go inside. While chanting to myself the scary theme song of Westworld, I saw a man roaming among the caravans. At first, he seemed like a regular buyer, walking from one box to the other and choosing his goods. But his physique made me stare at him. He had a long black hair tied to the back, long sharp face with dark beard and darting dark brown eyes. He was wearing a long coat like the one Neo wore in the Matrix. He had a poker face, no expression whatsoever. But when he looked up and saw me looking at him, he drew a sinister smile that shivered my skin and made me look down immediately. I stopped the singing and continued walking head down. Imagine a tall, broad shouldered man darting at you with half a smile that tilts his lips a bit. Who wouldn't be troubled? But I kept searching for my items. The way the caravans were lined, the stranger and I had to meet at a certain point. And that idea made my eyes roam left and right, searching for an alternative path. But unfortunately, there was not. We closed onto one another, with darkness prevailing, both outside and inside my head, foggy air surrounding us, and the mixed smell of all God's foods. I bumped into the man. I imagined I will experience wrath I've never seen before. Terribly sorry, sir, I murmured. He gave me a short smile and said, No worries, child, and went on. Why did he behave gently? Was he in that much of a hurry? Did all his stares fly away? I turned my back quickly to check if he's going to charge from behind. the stranger was hugging another man. It turned out that he was not looking at me in the first place. His best friend and my coach was behind me the whole time. Long time no see. How are you, Edward? The stranger gave him a pat on the shoulder and started laughing. Only if you knew how scared I was, Mr. Edward. I went home, thinking that I should stop making Westworld take a toll on me. Try to come up with different characteristics that were good about this piece and where it can be improved. But the thing that we could agree on that it had specific descriptive vocabulary. Well, at least good enough number. It had sensory details. It created images through the use of senses. It had, at the end, a plot twist. If you remember, the plot twist is something that ends the story with what is not expected because of the setting and the mood. The whole of the story was going to the point that you felt there will be confrontation between the child, Hajiman, and the stranger, right? But at the end, it turned out that the stranger was not even looking at the child, was not making evil, sinister smiles towards that child. He was just looking at his friend, Edward. That was the sport coach of Hajiman. So this plot twist is well crafted here. But what improvements can we make to the overall descriptive piece? Let me know what you think. We're done for today. Thank you very much for listening. Stay safe and keep up your good work.